Hi, everyone, and welcome to Optimizing Cloud Migration for State and Local Governments. I'm Andrew Werner, publisher of technology for GovExec, and I'm excited to be here this afternoon. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our underwriters, NetApp and Arrow, for their support in today's event.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, my name is Nadine Cummings, and I am the engineering manager at Arrow for the NetApp line of business. Now, you might think that moving data or small workloads to the cloud for storage is hybrid cloud. But there's more to it than that. Customers need full operability. Data, workloads, management, security, all of those components must work together across the hybrid cloud where data and applications have mobility. The reality is that migration to the cloud is an incremental process, and we're seeing government agencies embrace a mix of hybrid cloud, virtual private cloud, and traditional IT solutions. The digital transformation and the journey to the cloud is one of the most pressing challenges that businesses face. Some issues that business face today are mission-critical applications sitting on legacy hardware. Limited resources, but most often it's security concerns about moving data to the public cloud, managing that sensitive data and those workloads, and making sure that they stay on-prem to those regulatory mandates and local requirements. Despite those challenges, the show must go on, and the need to increase the speed for digital transformation in IT make NetApp the ideal environment for a hybrid cloud solution. Question, how do we accelerate that digital transformation for government agencies? And the answer is by leveraging the power of NetApp's ONTAP. Now, ONTAP is NetApp's operating system, and it provides the data fabric that connects the dots for those integration points for your infrastructure. So from consolidating legacy hardware to utilizing NetApp's native integration with all public cloud providers, NetApp has the ability to unify a customer's environment, your environment, and free that data to where it needs to be. Data management and cloud infrastructure, all of those can scale to support primary and secondary workloads on-prem and in the cloud. You no longer need to make trade-offs. You can deploy your application where your business requires. And NetApp does not support public clouds only. We can run ONTAP software natively in the public cloud. So with ONTAP software running natively in the cloud, the NetApp portfolio will give you the security and compliance for applications and protect across the entire data infrastructure, in the cloud, on-prem, or with hybrid cloud. NetApp has built an open ecosystem of products and solutions that help you build your data fabric on your own terms, starting with what's more important to you. The NetApp hybrid cloud portfolio combines systems, software, and cloud data services with solutions that are built around the industry and those leaders in enterprise applications, cloud, and even private cloud solutions. So whether you are focused on a need for encryption, data protection and backup, compliance, or even Kubernetes and native cloud, the key is data fabric powered by ONTAP software, which also runs native in the cloud. ONTAP software can manage that end-to-end compute, the storage, the cloud service providers as well, to make sure that you have an always-on infrastructure. You can get full support from NetApp and Arrow in helping leverage the cloud seamlessly and consistently to shift without a heavy lift. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Andrew for his interview with William Cole, Chief Technology Officer for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Thanks again to NetApp and Arrow. As state and local governments look towards technology modernization, cloud application promises scalability and cost-effective solutions. Adapting legacy systems to the cloud requires extensive modernization of traditional applications, processes, and policies. Without proper tools and knowledge, this complex migration prevents state and local governments from achieving the full benefits of a cloud-based system. Today, I'm honored to be joined by someone who has been at the forefront of his Commonwealth's cloud migration, Massachusetts Chief Technology Officer, Bill Cole. Bill, it's an honor to have you here today and to be talking with you. So let's dive right in. You mentioned we were talking a little bit before that you've been leading the cloud migration for Massachusetts since its inception in 2015. Can you take us through the early days of that program? What kicked it off, and really what were the key moments for you in the outset of the program?
Yeah, certainly. So, like we were talking about before, about 7 years or so ago from, the inception of the idea of looking at cloud services and starting to review, all the various options to move to the cloud. And, that's everything from infrastructure as a service all the way to, SaaS solutions. But we had done an assessment across all of the executive branch and all of the various data centers that were out there that were somewhat independently run and operated. There was 20 plus data centers, if I remember right. 7 years was a long time ago, that were in various states, everything from an MDF closet to, a professionally run 7,000 plus type square foot data center, and in various states too, right? Some of them needed significant upgrades to the facilities components of the power and cooling, and some were just not really fit to ever be data centers. So we kind of have that sprawl of not only the number of data centers, but the various platforms and products run within. I felt like we owned one of everything. So it made a lot of sense to consolidate that down, to standardize on various platforms, standardize on various cloud providers. It's standardized on the operational model. So it was really at that stage that kind of the light bulb went off and said, yeah, this is the future. This is where we should be going. We shouldn't be running all of these various, smaller data centers or even large data centers on-prem any longer.
Yeah, that's, I don't think you're alone in that, in finding that struggle in the early days of this. So, and you started to touch on it, but kind of as you were analyzing that and looking to migrate to the cloud, one of the biggest challenges can be adapting legacy systems. It can be time consuming and very expensive upfront. How did you all approach that, and kind of more specifically, when and where and what did you decide to migrate to the cloud?
We realized with the cloud, there was much more agility, scalability, DR capabilities just kind of built right in, that flexibility, the ease of deployment, the speed of deployment, the speed of change was all there with the cloud, which we were struggling with on-prem. So we started to take a look at what are the most vulnerable data centers, what are the most vulnerable systems, and looking at it as an opportunity to get out of those data centers, to upgrade some of those applications that are critical, really to optimize them. Some of them, we joked that we found an application that was critical to the business that was running on a laptop on someone's desk. That is a scary, proposition there for a business to be relying on something like that. So moving that out to the cloud, we then got the reliability. We had high availability DR. We took that opportunity to then re-platform it onto a modern OS that's supported. We take a look at the technology stack and see where we can make improvements while we're doing the migration, from upgrading the OS, addressing vulnerabilities. A lot of it we approached as lift and shift. Let's go fast and furious to get these things out of the on-prem data centers, but also taking the opportunity to do kind of a lift and optimize. It's kind of the other term that we're using, right? So it may be still in that kind of traditional three-tiered architecture that you would normally deploy in your on-prem data center, but we would take some of that opportunity to say, well, we can deploy this in 2 different availability zones, 2 different data centers, where it's pretty difficult to do in an on-prem world, when you've got these 20 small data centers and maybe, a couple primary, spanning that application across those data centers in the on-prem world is a lot more difficult than clicking a couple of buttons in the cloud. And wow, now I'm running it out of 2 geographically diverse locations, and I've got this wonderful high availability. I can keep this up 100% of the time because I can patch one half, keep the application online, bring that back and patch the other half. So there's so many benefits that we try to build into the migration strategy.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And what you're describing there is kind of the upside opportunity and also the general architecture of it. The next question I have is sort of more in terms of the human side of it. So when you look at cloud migration, collaboration is obviously key. So let's talk about that from a couple different angles. First, you need support from your internal partners. So you need some champions. How did you receive that support from leadership, and how did you kind of activate that support, either leadership or below kind of the team?
Yeah, that collaboration is key, right? To get the key folks on board with the idea, with the strategy of doing this. And 7 years ago, that wasn't as easy as it is today. Today, I think most of the technology world realizes there's a strong reason to move towards the cloud. Back then, it was kind of, wow, a lot of state and local governments aren't doing this yet. Why do we need to do this? Well, we've been doing this on-prem just fine for years. So we put together a presentation, and I kind of went on a roadshow, just selling this idea, selling this strategy to leadership, to down in the weeds technical people on the various IT teams across the executive branch. And some of it you were initially met with a lot of resistance, and again, like, why do we need to change? We've been doing it on-prem. We know how to do that on-prem. This cloud thing seems scary. And a lot of times in those initial meetings, you got met with that resistance, but by the end of the meeting, they were like, "Well, what about this? What about this? Could we do containers? Could we do serverless? Could we do that?" And we're like, okay, calm down. A half an hour ago at the beginning of the meeting, you weren't sure if you wanted to go to the cloud. And so the excitement grew quickly. And we spent a lot of time with training and education and trying to get the folks that were going to have hands on keyboard to have a solid understanding of not just the technology and how to do it, but why. What are the benefits of doing it? Why are we going in this direction? It kind of easing in their minds too that it's a shift in IT. It's kind of like when virtualization came along. Well, that was kind of scary. And there was a lot of people that said, well, you can't run a database on a virtual server. It just doesn't perform right. Or there was lots of reasons why virtualization was scary and you shouldn't move towards that. It was the same thing with cloud. So you just kind of had to prove out that, yeah, everything's going to be okay. There's massive workloads running out in the cloud today. And part of that sales pitch was kind of pointing to some of the, not to just the benefits, but other, even private sector that are doing it successfully. And we furthering that, journey, picking certain workloads and getting them out there and then proving it, saying, look, we did this, it's up and running now. No, there's been no harm. Like, everyone's happy. That went a long way as well.
Yeah, no, that, and you kind of touch on both sides of it. Once you guys were able to, and I think pointing to commercial sector, you're either a really good salesman or there was some clear benefits there. Did once leadership was on board, did that make the process easier, or was there still some holdouts that really kind of dragged their feet on the migration?
Yeah, the support from leadership helped a ton. There was some holdout still, right? The real technically deep hands-on keyboard folks of changing, change is scary, right? So you've got to go through that organizational change management aspect. And again, back to the training. If you're thinking about going to the cloud, start your training now. You're already, I've said this before in other settings, you're already too late. You should have been training already. Get people comfortable with the concepts get people comfortable with that their jobs are going to change slightly. We're not, looking to get rid of those jobs. It's just a natural progression in IT. Nothing stays stagnant. But with the cloud, it's such a massive leap of change. It's such a large change to the technology, how it's managed, and who manages it. And we took that opportunity from a organizational change management perspective to look at people's roles and skill sets and say, okay, well, you might be a Windows Server admin, and we still need Windows Server admins. It's kind of irrelevant where the server runs, right? When's the last time you went in the data center and hugged your physical server? No, not too many people these days are still doing that. It's virtualized, so it's running somewhere different in someone else's data center. But your skills are going to change a little bit, or need to change, where maybe you're doing more things within the cloud than just doing the Windows Server administration. So that kind of organizational change management, it needs to be built into any cloud journey, any cloud program that you're going to, kickstart.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's great insight, and thank you for sharing that. And with that kind of explored the internal perspective of the need for collaboration and what it can look like. Let's shift a little bit to the external approach. How did you know when to bring in, kind of start leveraging the private sector, and what did you look to where when you were evaluating vendors that were the right fit for you guys?
Yeah, we knew we wanted some help from the vendor community that had done this before at the scale that we're at. We're talking about, all of executive branch and some of the independents wanting to move in this direction. So making sure that we got the foundational services right, building our standard operating environment, taking a look at every single service that we utilize or run on the on-prem world, and kind of looking at that with an open mind to say, well, maybe we don't need to bring the exact architectural patterns or platforms and products out to the cloud. Now's a good opportunity to take a look at, is there opportunity to modify how we're doing things, to streamline? Can we automate? The more that we could do as infrastructure as code and automation, kind of reducing that manual input and configuration mistakes, because it's automated and done with code. So looking to vendor communities that had that experience to come in and teach us what we didn't know. Right? We knew how to do this on-prem very well and doing it for 30 plus years. The cloud gives you so many new opportunities to modify that slightly, that we wanted to make sure that we were following some vendor advice that had done this at this scale. If you think about state government, we're kind of like a massive corporation that has multiple different businesses under it that all are kind of consolidating it into a single platform, single architecture, and that's overwhelming to begin with. And that, never mind, let's replatform everything to cloud services. So it was key to bring in the right vendors that had done this before to give us the solid advice, so we weren't starting off building a whole bunch of technical debt because we didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah, no, and it's smart to, the best leaders know what they don't know. So that's 2015 as you guys are setting out on this journey. Let's fast forward a couple years to 2019. The unthinkable happens in Massachusetts. Tom Brady leaves the Patriots, but also there is a pandemic that no one saw coming, and that for citizens changes, and for everyone changes the whole world. And citizens are all of a sudden immediately needing to work remotely, and government services need to be digitized. A lot of governments, state, local, even the federal, was scrambling at that point to catch up. Did you feel that the framework you guys had put in place back in 2015 had helped you transition to the unexpected shifts in the world?
It absolutely did. We were very happy that we were that far out, or that far along in our cloud journey. For examples like our unemployment system, I know so many states struggled with that. The amount of growth in unemployment, nobody could have predicted that. And I make the joke that a lot of states' unemployment systems, they were running just fine, but you couldn't get to them because the network circuit that allowed you in that front door to get to the data center where it was running was just overwhelmed in seconds. Where ours was running out in the cloud, and it was so easy for us to scale that up to meet the demand. We didn't have wasn't a blip. It just a couple of clicks later, and we're up and running with the additional capacity. We've done other things, like we already put our payroll system out in the cloud. You could get to that remotely, from anywhere. So that didn't have any impact. Cloud, the agility of the cloud, we were able to stand up from the time of the request to having the first files transferred, a managed file transfer solution for state labs and private labs to transfer COVID testing data back and forth in 4 hours. So we got the request and said, hey, we can't get these tests transferred. We can't get this data transferred back and forth between the private and the state labs. Can you help us out? How can we move these files around efficiently? And it seems impossible, but yeah, from the time that request came in to the time we were moving the first files, it was only 4 hours. And it's still in use today. It's incredible. I'm not sure that would have been possible on-prem. We probably still would be talking about the procurement. And never mind stood the service up. So the other piece there is, remote access. All of a sudden, having tens of thousands of state employees needing to be able to work remotely, being able to connect to VPN, to the Office suite that we were already underway of deploying for all state employees, we just accelerated that timeline. We were able to do things as well, like in just a handful of weeks, deploy a virtual call center. So hundreds of call center employees could work from home instead of coming into a building. So the cloud really made all of that so much more simple and quick to get up and running. It really helped us address the fast growing needs, like the immediate needs of what happened during the pandemic.
Yeah, and you talked about it both for citizens and for your workforce. So your constituents, the state of Massachusetts, is very lucky that you guys were able to be nimble in that. Is there anything else on maybe specifically the government workforce, your team, or even in the IT space that the issues where you've really been cloud migration has really changed or impacted that workforce beyond kind of what you've already shared?
Yeah, we see a lot of movement in both the vendor community and the state employees in the IT space of with the return to the office, even if that's part-time, people that might have moved out of state, a lot of people that took a look at this, I'm going to retire. It's an evolving workforce. I'm seeing that not only in, like I said, the state employees, but also the vendor community. And sometimes there's some challenges there in recruiting because there's so much movement going on, that we're competing, with the private sector. And sometimes it's difficult for, states to compete with private sector that may have more flexibility on where you can work and, the pay ranges and things like that. So it's an interesting time right now to retain your workforce. And I think it's key to keep reinvesting in your people. And like I said, back to the training comment, right? The ability for them to enhance their skills and work on new technologies. I think that's another benefit, of the cloud that has helped retain some folks, that they know that we're moving in this direction or have moved in this direction. And there's a lot of opportunity to work with cool new technologies.
Yeah, no, well said. And we're nearing the end of our time here, but so much of the spirit of what our journalism is about and Route 50 is about is really sharing what you've been able to achieve with other states and other folks in your position. So I guess in closing, what would be the biggest advice that you can give people at various stages of the cloud journey? And yeah, I guess what would you tell them to do, and maybe also what would you have done differently if you could go back in time?
I think I'll start with what I would have done differently is take it a little bit slower than we did. We went really fast. I remember having some conversations with, other leadership and, other higher ed organizations and state and other state governments and private sector. And they're like, you're going to try and do what in what time frame? I don't know if that's possible. Well, we did. We pulled it off, and they were all blown away. I've had a couple of the conversations years later, like, hey, we did it, and they shook their head. I don't know how you did it, but I think if we went just a little bit slower, we could have taken the opportunity to modernize more of those infrastructures, those applications, and then not have to do, a backlog of technical debt that you need to then work through. The other piece of it, though, is don't get stuck not doing anything, over analyzing, because we could get stuck there today, even with all of the thousands and thousands of workloads we have running out there. Pick something that's low risk, get it out there, get it out to the cloud, work through some of those, gotchas that, I didn't realize. You said it well earlier, right? You don't know what you don't know, but find that low risk workload. Maybe there's one that there's a development environment or a QA environment. Put those out there first. If it's down, what's the impact that it's down? If it can be down for 8 hours, yeah, then you have some time to work through the mistakes that you didn't realize you made. Otherwise, you kind of get this analysis paralysis of just, I can't do anything because I need everything perfect before I move my first workload to the cloud. And you'll just get stuck in that and never move any workloads. There's just so many opportunities to change what you are doing that it can be like, I don't know what to do next. Do we modify what we use for DNS? Do we modify, what we do for security scanning? What tools do we use? You kind of get wrapped up in that because there are so many opportunities to change. Again, pick a workload that's low risk, get that core team together and get it out there and learn, and then iterate on that. And always have that open mind and to be able to iterate throughout your cloud journey, right? From whether that's your first workload that you're moving out there to us 7 years later, where we have more running in the cloud than we do on-prem now. We're still looking at areas of opportunity every day. How could we mature what we've put out there? Heck, we're at the point now where we're ready to decommission some environments and some applications that we moved out to the cloud, that many years ago.
Well, Bill, it sounds like the state of Massachusetts is lucky to have you working on this, and we were lucky to have your time today. So thank you. Some really actionable advice there at the end that I think our audience will really appreciate. So I'd like to thank you, and again, I'd like to thank our underwriters, NetApp and Arrow, for their support in today's event. And thanks to our audience for tuning in. For GovExec, I'm Andrew Werner, and thank you and take care. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.